So if you've been watching these videos, you've probably caught on to a few things. Um, Based on my series of D&D alternatives, I've mentioned that my group just finished playing its Pathfinder campaign that we've been playing for 2.5 years. Um, so we're starting to play a new session, and I mentioned I want to do another series. This is probably not going to be that series that I want, but this is a pretty easy thing for me to do and try out. I recognize this is going to be the middest content ever. But I'm going to start a journal series of my group's Soulbound playthrough. Now, I haven't made a video about Soulbound yet because we're all new to it. And I don't feel like I know the system well enough to do a video yet, but hopefully after we play a few more weeks, I'll do a video that long with a long, good explanation for it. What you need to know though, real fast, is that Soulbound is the Warhammer Fantasy Age of Sigmar tabletop role-playing game. So if you know Warhammer Fantasy, you already know what I'm talking about. You already know the scenario. I don't know Warhammer Fantasy very well. I know 40k better, although not all that well either, because I don't play the tabletop. But at my table, I think most of the table, besides me and one other person, have played the Warhammer Fantasy tabletop before. And in all seriousness, I'd probably really enjoy it. It's just that I don't have a place in my side of town to play in. I don't want to drive half an hour, so whatever. So I'm gonna do, for a while at least, we'll see how it goes, a weekly series of how my group's Soulbound playthrough has been going. So this is part of a pre-made adventure. We're starting with Crash and Burn, which I think we've been modifying the story a little bit, but just as a spoiler alert, we're going through Crash and Burn. And then after, it'll be 3 weeks of play, we'll get into Ulfenkarn, which is going to be the main campaign we're actually running. Crash and Burn, I've seen people say as a one-shot. I don't see how you could do this in one sitting, but we've taken some detours, so whatever. So yeah, if you don't want to be spoiled for those campaigns, don't watch this video series because it's going to obviously spoil those for you. But yeah, I'm going to start off by talking about the characters we're playing in the tabletop, because I think some of them are very interesting and maybe problematic, but that's okay. If any of the people in my group see this video and I've gotten something wrong, you probably should correct me because this is my impression of your characters at the table right now. So starting off, my character, I just like playing sneaky, stealthy boys. And so I don't know Warhammer that well. I didn't see a lot of sneaky, stealthy boys on human side, which would have probably been easier for me to play like a human character. Because you can kind of figure out what a human is and does in this world. But I've decided to be a Cainite Shadow Stalker, which means there is background to my character that I am not entirely aware of. But Cainite Shadow Stalkers are like assassin-driven elves that can leap through shadows, and I don't know. I think they're super cool. I'm excited for my character. I've already had a lot of fun being able to hide in the shadows and being able to get a really good sneak attack on someone. My combo is very reliant on me being able to sneak on my opponent, so the first time we fight somebody who has a really good natural awareness, my character is going to be less useful in combat. My group also has a Dark Elf Corsair, which is probably the character that's most similar to mine. This is a character that is pretty much, the Corsairs are typically like pirates, but their pirate crew was more like monster hunters at sea. So not necessarily evil, or pirating, yeah. The one thing that might be a little more evil, though, is that this character is also a necromancer, despite being a dual-wielding stabby boy. So far, I think the only spell we've seen them use is some sort of spell that gives flight. So that's whatever. That's actually really useful for a melee character to be able to fly in this campaign, or in any campaign. But yeah, we also have a Priestess of Sigmar. And when I say priestess, I think the word nun might more accurately describe their character. This is just a human that praises Sigmar, and they've taken the miracles, which are kind of like different types of spells in the campaign. but they're really powerful. And this character has really been built to do miracles exceptionally well, and that's most of it. So we're gonna see how that runs because the character, I don't know, they have some blasting ability. Maybe I shouldn't say they're not versatile. Um, but they really went all in on being this like character of Sigmar and using the blessing system. So that should be pretty fun. The character is also very like a cloistered cleric, like shut in. So we must protect her at all costs because she is innocent. Um, we also have a Knight Venator, which is a Stormcast Eternal Archer. I'm going to be honest, I had to go back in the book and to figure out what their class was actually called because I don't know what this is. The Stormcast Eternals are pretty much like agents of Sigmar that have been like resurrected into these like they're like lightning metal people. They're actually like really cool. I like the art for them. But if they're killed, their soul, instead of like dying like most people, is just reborn by Sigmar and like resmithed into another agent. So pretty much anybody who's playing this race is playing somebody who's probably died multiple times already. Um, I know this player has plays them in the tabletop, which is probably one of the things. Again, if you play the tabletop, you'll really like the system because you can just play as a character from whatever race. Like the actual minis we're using at the table are just the Warhammer Fantasy minis. Um, except for I'm borrowing one because I don't play the game. Somebody else has a mini that's at like a friend's house that we haven't gotten yet. It's a thing. But yeah, so this is our archer boy. They also have a bird, which is some sort of special bird. I don't know the whole deal with it, but I don't know. Their model looks really cool. I like their character model at the table a lot. There is one problem that I personally have with the character. I don't think the player has an issue with it, so it doesn't matter. But I'll get into that when we talk about the character introductions. And then we have Guy. Guy is an orc that believes they're a human. I think they're a shaman. I don't know if shaman is the right title for them, but they cast magic. And they're like a trader. And they pretty much saw that these like a human trader had like the best stuff on them. And they're like, oh, well, I'm smart. I should just be a human trader as well. So they're a human trader now and not an orc. Um, I had some reservations before we started playing about having an orc in our group. Um, as far as I know from storytelling, this doesn't make sense, but apparently there are like ways it does narratively make sense. Apparently, because we're playing through. When you play in Soulbound, you have to have somebody that has bound your souls together, and for us, it's Sigmar. Apparently, Sigmar was actually friends with the god of orcs. I don't know. If you understand it better, say something in the comments and let me know. But I my reservations are gone, by the way, because the player that's playing this character has done I really like seeing them roleplay. They're definitely like really getting into it. They've got a heavy accent and everything. Um, yeah, they seem to really be enjoying role playing the character. I'm enjoying their role playing. Everyone at the table's having a good time of it. So even if it narratively doesn't make sense, the having fun with it is more important. But yeah, if you play this game and you wanted to play an orc, you do have to buy an extra book because orcs are not in like the core book or even like some of the more recent or some of the older books, which are like the books of order. I don't even know what book it's in. You'd have to go online. I'm sorry. But yeah, that's our party, right? So we're playing in a soulbound, and what like I said before is like our souls are bound together. The one caveat to that is our archer boy, because our archer's boy's soul has already been bound to Sigmar. He is technically not a part of the soulbind. He's just somebody who is traveling with us. Narratively, I get it. I personally do not like that. Just because I feel like that excludes them from the party a little bit. There's certain mechanics when you call upon like the power of your group's souls, and this character cannot participate in that because their soul isn't bound to us. And especially in the first episode with us all being together, um, I felt like that character or that player just didn't have as much to do because their character wasn't part of the soul binding and as much of the introduction. But this is something apparently the player already knew ahead of time and was okay with it. So that's, if they're okay with it, I'm going to be okay with it too. Um, so getting into the actual first session, now that I've introduced our characters, because this will make everything else a lot easier. Um, our first session, we started with a different intro. I think Crash and Burn just starts with you being on a ship, like an airship, a flying airship. We actually started at the Golden Castle before the Soul Binding. This I understand is not in the book, but this is something our GM did, and I really like it. If you are going to start Soulbound, I actually would recommend you play out this scene. You know, it doesn't have to be with Sigmar or whatever, but play out the scene. That way it allows you to introduce your characters. So you get to introduce your characters going to the Golden Citadel, getting to actually meet Sigmar, and you get to kind of explain that means for your characters, and kind of explain why your characters are here. Which for some of them, it's very easy. Like our priestess, our nun of Sigmar, isn't gonna say no to Sigmar, right? And she's ecstatic, like she's like happy crying at getting to like meet her god and all this stuff. Like that was really fun and that was really easy. And then you have my character who worships like a murder god and would typically have some issue with what's happening. Um, so I got to kind of explain the background of my character and the little stories I had tied to them. Um, Pretty much any man is kind of like magically bound as a servant of Cain. Certain things like even them having like magical abilities usually suppressed because it's just drained and given in a like the matriarchal society. Um, my character's background is that they like thought they were in private and mentioned like something about this. Word got out and they were challenged by a witch elf. Now, my character, your starting character, is not sharp enough to take a witch elf. I'm pretty sure I haven't looked at like the stat blocks and bestiaries because I don't want to spoil anything, but I'm just saying my character cannot 1v1 a witch elf. Um, so in their backstory, they were challenged, they lost, and as they're like on the ground bleeding out, the priestess is over them like in their prayer, pretty much making a giant scene of this, like set an example. And with their like before they lost consciousness, they were able to like find a hidden dagger and stab the priestess, which causes another issue because I don't know. I'd have to talk to the DM if my character actually killed the witch elf or it just ended in a draw. Either way, that is not how it was supposed to play out. So the reason my character is here for the soul binding is almost as a punishment. Pretty much, we don't want you here anymore. And my character, for the past few days following this, has had to like look over their shoulder everywhere, despite being able to like blend in and like teleport to shadows. Pretty much has to stay out of the shadows because they're worried other assassins in their order are going to come after him. So he pretty much took this as a chance to get out of town. Um, and yeah, that's why my character is there, despite being from a separate faction. And that's kind of my role play around it. If you want to play, I don't know, you can create your own stories for this, or the way though it works in the book. I don't want to get into too much because I'll make a video explaining archetypes more. But you can play an archetype, which is like a starting class, and it's even in the book. It's like if you want to play like a witch elf, if you want to play like a like various types of, there's so many like different types of dwarves I don't understand. It's actually pretty simple in the I pretty much took the archetype, like the base stat block for my character. I tweaked like one thing around because I didn't like it, and my character was done. It was actually really easy. But we got to have everyone explain why they're there for the soul binding. They got to explain like their sort of relationship with Sigmar. And we did the soul binding ritual, which is a very painful ritual of your character's souls essentially being ripped out, put in a blender, and then stuffed back in. That is actually like about how it goes. So if you're going to play this campaign, I would actually start with the soul binding ritual rather than the book, which I think just understands that your characters are in a soul binding and kind of ignores all that. Probably don't do a combat before the Soulbinding ritual, because that Soulbind is what makes your characters like exemplary. But yeah, you can the role playing was kind of fun. Certain things like the like people in the Golden Citadel being on edge with my character and keeping them under heavy watch, um, kind of set a scene, like set a tone for how like my character as this like worshipping an assassin goddess was not very well trusted in the Citadel, while certain other characters were very well welcomed there. Um, but regardless, we did that. That took about half the session. Actually, it took quite a bit of time, but I think it was a very good use of our time. That was a very good call by our game master. I would recommend you run that as well. Getting onto the actual story for Crash and Burn, which again, spoilers. Um, we started with Anvilmar. Um, Pretty much you're getting on an airship there, which is going to transport you. I don't know if we're going to the same place that the Crash and Burn book takes you, or if that's been modified to match with the Ulfenkarn book. I don't know the regional lore well enough to know any difference. Anyway, I'm just like the DM's like, you're going here, and I'm like, okay. Yeah, and sometimes that's just the easiest thing to do. It's just okay. I believe you, GM. There are other people in my group that know Warhammer Fantasy much better, which also makes this a lot easier. That way, it's not 5 people trying to talk to the GM and learn the lore at the same time. We've got other people to help out. But we get to Anvilmar. We get a little bit of a chance to do some RP and little skill checks before we get on the boat. This is mostly for you to learn about the ship and its crew beforehand. This honestly probably could have been skipped, but some people probably like really want to know like who is the captain of the ship and all that stuff. And I guess you can kind of do as much with it as you want. Um, we didn't spend any real time in Anvilmar. We were pretty much there for a morning while the ship was getting made. And then on the ship, there's where we got more time to actually RP as our characters. This was kind of our first time to really figure out our kind of places in kind of with the world and then kind of with the Soulbound. My character, and the reason I spent so much time explaining my backstory of the character, is very unsure of what they've done. They were pretty much sent here as a mission from their goddess, um, which is still important. But they've now been given a like spark of divine by Sigmar and have been eternally bound to like an actual like priestess of Sigmar. Like this to me is a very like theological problem for my character. Um, and that's going to be my character's long-term goal, is kind of sorting this out and getting through it, which I'll talk more about goals when I do make a Soulbound video. But I spent a little bit of time exploring what the Soulbind was, which the DM did a good job kind of explaining. I was able to like reach out and sort of feel the emotions of the other characters, which were a lot more excited. Like one of them, the person who was like a captain of a monster hunter boat, was really excited to see an airship for the first time and was kind of going with the engineer and learning about it. The priestess Sigmar was being very like social and very excited about things. Um, and I decided that my character was going to at least was starting to accept what happened to them and was going to like leave his room and socialize with the Soulmind. Kind of like, okay, this is the situation I'm in. I should at least start getting to know these people. Which is like this is going to be a very slow process for my character to come around to what's happened to them, because I think they probably underestimated the situation until the actual Soulbind, and now you're in it. You kind of can't undo this. So, but the next day we had our first combat, and the game seems like it's going through and slowly introducing certain mechanics to you. One thing I will say, I don't know if the game master has changed these combats in any way, because we are a 5-person party, which means we're probably bigger than what's expected. These combats have felt very threatening, though. Like, I feel like we've been taking a lot of damage, and it's not that the GM has been like single targeting anyone. It just feels like the combats are meant for everyone to be taking damage. And if we didn't have a healer in our party, we would have characters dying, maybe not dead, but getting to the dying state much more frequently. um, so yeah, first thing I might recommend is that your party composition have somebody who can heal, because it seems like the game is balanced around expecting you have a healer. Um, and healers tend to be like, at least the heal are I want to say clerics. I'm used to like D&D and Pathfinder and stuff. Uses their miracle is like an AoE heal. So as long as you're standing close enough to them, you get healed. Um, and yeah, the way distances and zones are different, but I'll talk about that more when I actually make the video. I'm now realizing I probably should have made the video before this. Whatever. I'm 20 minutes. Okay. I'm almost done, sort of. The fighting on the airship felt like we took a lot of damage. It also felt like the combat was made for characters to have range. Um, just based on the mechanics of the monsters that fight, they are very hit and run or attack from range, which for my character who has a sword and a dagger doesn't work very well. I can throw my dagger once, I don't get it back. Thankfully, the ship had cannons on it. I'm guessing this is thought ahead by the people who wrote the book. Um, Giving a ranged option in a mandatory ranged combat is helpful because you're attacked by like flying creatures. Why would they just stand on your ship? They don't have to, right? Um, so we do our fight. A few turns later, our ship is going to go down. Two things that happened here that are noteworthy, especially if you're planning to run this. Um, with the ship going down, our GM gave us the option to just told us is like you can take an action to brace as you see the ship is going down. Um, and what that ended up doing is it lowered the difficulty for us, pretty much falling out of the sky, um, and hopefully to succeed. Three of the people in our party braced, including me. I'm the only person that braced and failed, which dice happens. It's whatever. Um, but that pretty much means we didn't get to choose where we started the next combat, and we took some damage. It's all okay. Um, the thing that's really important, though, that happened is that two characters in our party have flying. Now, Pathfinder and like D&D, you don't usually have flying very early, like at the start of a campaign, so it's not a problem. But with this system, it seems like you can just start with flying by having like magical flight or picking like a race that has wings. Like it's fantasy. Um, so that did lead to a maybe slightly awkward issue, where it's like this character is flying. Why do they fall out of the sky with the ship? Um, if you're running this and your group has no flying characters, this isn't a problem to worry about. But I think the issue our GM came up with is like you can stay in the sky, but once the ship is down, you just get swarmed by all the demons that are like fighting the airships because they don't have anyone else to fight, so you just kind of get eaten alive by infinite demons. It feels weird. If you plan to run this game and you know you've got a flying character in your party, figure this out ahead of time because it's one of those things that's going to come up and it might, yeah. But we ended our first session getting to do a combat. We got to do a few skill checks to kind of figure out how that works. And really, I think the highlight was actually doing like the Soulbind. That sort of intro scene of getting to introduce our characters and meet Sigmar felt really cool. That was definitely for me the highlight of the adventure. And I've got a pretty yeah, yeah. My character is very built to melee stuff and sneak, neither of which I was able to do in the first day, but it still felt really good. I was excited for that. So yeah, at this point, it kind of left on a pretty good cliffhanger, and all of us are looking forward to the next session, which has actually happened, but I'm going to catch up with these videos and eventually. So yeah, this is 24 minutes. This is longer than I meant to be, which means nobody's probably going to watch it. Regardless, if you did enjoy the series, leave a like or comment, something to let me know that I should continue doing this sort of Soulbound journal series. Because if so, I'll do one of these every week. We're going to play Soulbound almost every Wednesday anyway. I could probably pump one of these out every Thursday, despite this being Friday. And yeah, it's once I get into a habit of it, it's fine. But if people don't watch these videos or care about it, then I'm not going to keep making them, So that's it. Soulbound was really cool. I recommend giving it a chance. Once my group has played a few more sessions of Soulbound, I'll do a D&D alternatives video about Soulbound. But I just want to have a little more experience before I get into that. So, yeah. Regardless, thanks for hanging out. Do YouTube stuff. I'll see you.